The Lost Kingdom of Benin, Empire of Bronze and Fire. This isn't a fantasy epic. It's the real story of the Kingdom of Benin, an African powerhouse that thrived for centuries, leaving behind a legacy of bronze and fire. Have you ever heard of a city with walls 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China? Or an empire whose artists created metalwork so advanced it baffled European explorers? This isn't a fantasy epic. It's the real story of the Kingdom of Benin, an African powerhouse that thrived for centuries, leaving behind a legacy of bronze and fire. For hundreds of years, nestled in the rainforests of what is now modern-day Nigeria, the Kingdom of Benin flourished. It wasn't just a kingdom. It was a highly organized, powerful, and wealthy empire, ruled by a divine king known as the Oba. The Oba was the political, military, and spiritual leader of his people, presiding over a sophisticated court and a complex bureaucracy that managed everything from trade to justice. The capital, Benin City, was a marvel of urban planning, a sprawling metropolis that amazed the first European visitors in the 5th–10th century. But what truly set Benin apart was its art. The artists of Benin were masters of the lost wax casting technique, creating breathtaking sculptures from bronze and brass. These weren't just decorations. The Benin bronzes were historical documents, a library cast in metal. Imagine walking through the royal palace and seeing walls adorned with gleaming bronze plaques. Each one told a story, depicting kings, warriors, court ceremonies, and even encounters with Portuguese traders. There were intricately detailed statues of past Obas, powerful queen mothers, and leopards, the symbol of royal power. The level of detail and realism was unparalleled anywhere in the world at that time. When Europeans first saw these pieces, they simply couldn't believe that such sophisticated work could have been created by African artists. They came up with all sorts of theories, suggesting the skills must have come from ancient Egypt or even the lost city of Atlantis. They were wrong. This was a uniquely African artistic tradition, perfected over generations. The heart of this empire was Benin City, and its defenses were legendary. Spreading out from the city center was a massive network of man-made walls and moats, known as the Walls of Benin. Historians and archaeologists estimate that this was one of the largest earthwork structures ever built by humankind. The entire system of interlocking ramparts stretched for an estimated 16,000 kilometers. To put that into perspective, the Great Wall of China is about 21,000 kilometers long, but the Benin walls were a far more complex, integrated defensive system. These weren't just walls to keep people out. They were a symbol of the kingdom's power, organization, and engineering genius, enclosing hundreds of towns and villages connected to the capital. They represented a massive investment of labor and a clear statement of the empire's strength and permanence. Benin's power wasn't just military. It was also economic. The kingdom was a major player in international trade long before the transatlantic slave trade dominated the region. Situated near the coast, it became a hub for commerce. The Oba controlled all trade, ensuring the kingdom got the best deals. They exported valuable goods like high-quality pepper, ivory, and beautifully woven textiles. In return, they imported goods from Europe, most notably brass and copper manillas, which were then melted down and transformed by their master craftsmen into the famous bronzes. This trade relationship, particularly with Portugal, was initially one of mutual respect. The Portuguese were so impressed by the order and power of Benin that they treated the Oba as an equal monarch. The Oba, in turn, was a shrewd negotiator, controlling which Europeans were allowed into his city and on what terms. He maintained his kingdom's sovereignty and dictated the flow of goods and ideas, showcasing a remarkable political and economic acumen. For centuries, this great empire stood strong, a beacon of African civilization. But its golden age came to a tragic and violent end. By the late 19th century, the scramble for Africa was in full swing, and European powers were carving up the continent for themselves. The British Empire, seeking to expand its control and secure the region's valuable resources like palm oil and rubber, set its sights on Benin. The relationship, once based on trade, soured as Britain's imperial ambitions grew. The Aba resisted British encroachment, wanting to maintain his kingdom's independence. The breaking point came in 1897. A British delegation, despite being warned not to come during a sacred festival period, attempted to march on Benin City. Most of the party was ambushed and killed, an act the British press sensationalized to justify a full-scale military response. The British Empire launched what it called the Punitive Expedition, a force of over 1,000 soldiers, armed with the latest machine guns and artillery, descended on Benin. The Edo warriors, fighting with courage, were no match for modern industrial weaponry. What followed was not just a conquest. It was the obliteration of a culture. The British forces looted Benin City on a scale that is hard to comprehend. They systematically stripped the Obas palace of its treasures. Thousands of priceless artifacts, the bronze plaques, the ivory tusks, the royal statues, the ceremonial heads were stolen. These were the kingdom's history books, its royal archives, its soul cast in metal. After the looting, the British set the city on fire. The great capital, a center of art and power for centuries, burned for days. The Aba was sent into exile, and the independent kingdom of Benin was no more. It was absorbed into the British colony of Nigeria. The stolen treasures, now infamously known as the Benin bronzes, were shipped back to London. Some were kept for the British Museum, but many were sold off to private collectors and other museums across Europe and America to pay for the cost of the expedition. And so, the historical records of the Benin Kingdom were scattered across the globe. Today, these masterpieces sit in glass cases in places like London, Berlin, Paris, and New York. They are admired for their beauty and craftsmanship, but often, the violent story of how they got there is left out. This brings us to the legacy of Benin today. The story of the Benin bronzes has become a central part of a global conversation about cultural heritage, colonialism, and restitution. For decades, Nigeria has been formally requesting the return of its stolen artifacts. It's a complex and emotional issue. Many Western museums argue they are universal museums that can care for the objects and make them accessible to a global audience. But for the people of Benin and Nigeria, these aren't just objects. They are a direct link to their ancestors, a vital part of their spiritual and cultural identity. How can a kingdom's history be fully understood when its archives are held hostage thousands of miles away? In recent years, the tide has started to turn. Some museums have begun the process of returning a small number of bronzes. Germany has pledged to return a significant number of its holdings. The Smithsonian in the United States has returned its collection. This is a monumental step, but thousands of pieces remain scattered. The debate continues, but it highlights a crucial question: who owns history? And what is the responsibility of former colonial powers to repair the damage they caused? The story of the Kingdom of Benin is a powerful reminder of Africa's rich and complex history. It's a story of incredible artistic achievement, sophisticated governance, and immense power. But it's also a story of brutal conquest and cultural loss. The fire of 1897 may have destroyed a city, but it could not extinguish the spirit of its people or the brilliance of its legacy. The bronzes, even in their exile, continue to tell the story of the great kingdom of Benin, an empire of bronze, now forever marked by fire. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more journeys into our world's incredible and often hidden histories. Let me know your thoughts on the Benin bronzes in the comments below. See you next time.